Well, good morning. I'd like to begin by catching my breath. Thanking Lynn for her heartfelt introduction. I'm blessed every morning to wake up next to my soulmate. I'd also like to thank Jory and the MORL staff and scientists who make this possible. I don't think I've ever met a more dedicated group of people. Their passion in their work is evident to all of you, and they have touched the lives of countless people around the world. And I'd also like to acknowledge Carla. So Dr. Nestor is, without a doubt, the best doctor in the clinical treatment of C3G in the world. And she has led the greatest number of clinical trials of new drugs. So we are a great team, and you all are in a good place. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's wonderful to see old friends who have been through this journey with us year after year, sharing stories and laughs and also cries together, and to make new friends. Now, as I start this talk, I wanted to know if any of you have seen Field of Dreams. So that's a 1989 movie. It stars Kevin Costner, and he has this dream about making a baseball diamond in a cornfield. And he decides to go for this dream. And he makes the baseball diamond, and ghosts of famous baseball players in the past come and play. And one of those players is Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Hey, is this heaven? No. It's Iowa.
So, welcome to heaven. So, the movie's about family relationships. It's about dreams. And it's about hope. And it's about believing. Family relationships, dreams, hope, and believing. And that's what kidneys is about. That's what the MORL is about. And that's what these C3G conferences are about. Exactly the same thing. So what I'd like to do today, I'm going to give two talks. The first one is the basis of C3G. And hopefully I will resolve some of the confusion for you. So I'm going to talk about the kidney, the anatomy of the kidney, and then I'll talk a little bit about complement, and then a little bit about how C3G is diagnosed. And there's one slide in this deck that's the most important, and I'll stop there and let you know so that we can talk about that one slide in greater detail. So the kidneys are amazing organs. They're about as big as your cell phone. So next time you use your cell phone, think of your kidney. They weigh about the size of a third of a can of Coke. So take your can of Coke, dump out 2/3 of it. That's about how much your kidney weighs. Each of us has about 1.5 gallons of blood in our body. So next time you open the refrigerator and you look at your gallon of milk, think of it as filled with blood and a little bit more, and that's what's in your body. And every 24 hours, your kidneys filter that 1.5 gallons of milk 20 to 25 times. So they are working 24/7 a lot. The filtering unit that you will hear about that you're familiar with is called the nephron. And the nephron has a bunch of parts, and most relevant to us is this part, the sieve or the glomerulus. And that's what we've talked about with you when we've seen you in the clinic. And that's what we'll talk about later today in more detail. How many nephrons do you have? Anywhere from 200,000 to 1,800 to 1.8 million. So, obviously if you had more, you'd kind of want to, you kind of like that. But on average, you got about 1 million in a kidney. So you have about 2 million. What do your kidneys do? They control your blood pressure. So we talked about your blood pressure for those of you who we saw in clinic on Thursday or Friday. They make EPO. And so some of you might be on EPO if you're on dialysis. And that's so you can make your red blood cells. They convert vitamin D to its active form, and they control your pH. So they are super people. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the complement system. And this is a talk that Ed or Carolyn Harris could give probably now. The complement system provides the first line of defense against an infection. It marks dead and foreign cells as garbage so they can be cleared from the body. So it put little tags on them so the body knows to remove them. It talks to other systems in the body so responses are coordinated. And it is on all the time. It's like a dripping faucet. And the scientific name for that is tickover. Not too scientific, but that was a name that was adopted in, I think, probably the 1960s. And that reflects the fact that complement is always active. However, complement is not too bright. It cannot tell you from not you. It cannot tell good from evil. And so it needs to be tightly regulated. And our health, relies on that control of the complement system. If the control is too little, then the complement system will be overactive. If the control is too robust, then the complement system is underactive. And so there's this delicate balance. And it is that balance that is disrupted in persons with C3G. And so here is our scale and the balance. If there's too much activation, we have inflammation. If there's too much control, you can get infections. And in C3G, we have too much activation. That activation, one of the things that we do in the lab in every one of you with C3G is we try and figure out what is driving the disease. Why is there too much activation? Is it because of genetic variation? And some of you in this room have genetic variation that is causing your complement system to be a little bit in overdrive. Are there acquired factors? Some of you in this room have nephritic factors that are autoantibodies that are causing the complement system to be overactive. Are there unknown factors? Basically, we didn't figure it out. And there's a substantial group of persons in whom we haven't figured it out. So that means we're either asking the wrong question, there's something that we don't understand, and we're actively pursuing that. So now how does the complement system work? There are 3 aspects to the complement system. There's the initiation phase, so that starts it. There's the amplification phase, that sustains it. And then there's the terminal pathway, and that is the consequence of complement activity. That leads to inflammation, cell destruction, and that marks the cells that need to be removed for removal. So this is the initiation phase. And we talk about this every conference. And shown in red is the alternative pathway, because the alternative pathway is most pertinent to C3G. This is the amplification phase. The amplification phase drives and sustains and amplifies the complement response. I show this going around and around. This molecule is called C3 convertase. So that's a name you should be somewhat familiar with. It only lasts for about 90 seconds. So it's a very short-lived molecule in the body. If it lasts longer, you have more amplification. And that, in part, is part of the problem in persons with C3G. It lasts longer or isn't controlled properly, even in some of you with mutation. And then there's the effector phase, or what happens as a result of complement activity. And you can have inflammation, cell destruction, and garbage pickup. So the alternative pathway is most relevant to C3G. And so we will talk about that a lot today. Dr. Nestor will talk about it a lot, and specifically in light of the drugs that inhibit complement activity. So now, how is C3 diagnosed? And all of you know it's diagnosed from a biopsy. And so here is a kidney, and the right kidney is a little bit lower than the left kidney because it's pushed down by the liver. This is the working unit that I showed you earlier, the nephron. I'm showing it sideways here because it's taken from this little block of the kidney there. And then I'm going to flip it up like this. This is the cortex of the kidney, the medulla of the kidney. This is the working unit of the kidney. I'm showing two of them on this particular slide. And if you blow this up, it looks like this. This is where urine goes. These are all blood vessels. And so the blood is filtered through these membranes, and you end up with waste in the urinary space. Now, look how gossamer thin all these membranes are. So just remember, it's really, really thin. It's really, really delicate. So when we do a biopsy, it's done under ultrasound guidance so that you can see where this needle is going. So there's the needle. And you get in that needle a core of tissue. It looks like a little worm. If you stain it, you can see these little red spots. Those are the glomeruli. That's what you're looking for. And so when you're doing the biopsy, you're hoping that the needle will go down one of these nephrons and capture that glomerulus. And then the nephropathologist looks at that tissue and in a variety of ways, using light microscopy, immunofluorescence, and electron microscopy. And most important for you to remember is immunofluorescence. And on immunofluorescence, on a biopsy of C3G, we have to see this positivity, this staining for C3 in the glomerulus. And so that's what we're looking for. And we compare it to other immunoreactants. And there are specific diagnostic criteria, specific definition that was worked out at a conference in 2013 in Hingston, England, that Carla and I attended, that define the criteria to diagnose C3G. So for example, if you have this and this on a biopsy, the IgG staining is pretty much the same as the C3G, the C3 staining. So this would not be C3G. Now, some of you have C3GN and some of you have DDD. That distinction is made by electron microscopy. And so here's our capillary or our glomerulus again, and we have the very thin capillary walls and glomerular basement membranes. And when we look at this under electron microscopy, we can see the capillary space, the urinary space, and the very, very thin membrane through which the blood is filtered into the urinary space. And in C3G, that thinness is lost. This is really, really thick. This is dense deposit disease, and this is C3GN. And you can see dense deposit disease is so named because these deposits are really dense. Some people have called them sausage-like deposits. Some people have said they're like Chinese characters in calligraphy. And so if you were asked, is this DDD or C3GN? And you look at these two, you're going to say, this is C3GN. So when we put this all together, you get a diagnosis from a kidney biopsy of C3 dominant glomerulonephritis based on the immunofluorescent picture. And then Dr. Nestor, Dr. Thomas, and I think of other things that fall under this label, including post-infectious GN. And for many of you, we talked about post-infectious GN on Thursday and Friday. And for some of you, we talked about monoclonal gammopathy of renal significance, MGERS, on Thursday or Friday. So we also think of those. And so this is the single slide you need to remember as a patient and family member. And unfortunately, it's not in the handout because I did this last night. When you get a diagnosis, you do not get a diagnosis of C3G. You get a diagnosis of C3 dominant glomerulonephritis. That's the diagnosis the nephropathologist can make from your biopsy. As a result of that diagnosis, then your doctor, Dr. Nestor, Dr. Thomas, whoever you see, has to decide which of these buckets you fit in. So if your doctor says on your biopsy, you got C3G, your doctor is wrong. You have C3 dominant glomerulonephritis. And then you have to figure out whether it's post-infectious, C3G, or monoclonal gammopathy of renal significance. And that is where the detective work comes. And often, often things are not black and white. They are shades of gray. So for those of you who we saw in clinic on Thursday or Friday, we might have said, we think, and the operative word was think, you have post-infectious. And we think you have post-infectious because of A, B, C, and D. And those are what we expect to see here. Or we think you have C3G, and we think you have that because of this, 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 and this. And that those this, and this is knowledge that we are gaining from our natural history study on C3G, which Dr. Nestor leads, and from the wealth of persons we have seen with these diagnoses. So the classification here is descriptive. It doesn't tell you which of these buckets you fall into, and your physician, your nephrologist has to tell you. And that can take a lot of work, and that's where the art of medicine comes in. So thank you.